If you're from Cincinnati, you're gonna get it. If not, welcome. Let's paint when pigs fly. Hello, welcome to Wild Developments. My name is Lauren, and my mission is to help you to connect with nature through art, storytelling, and creative exploration. Today, we're going to talk about flying pigs and learn all about Cincinnati. Let's dive in. All right, guys, when you open up your packet, you'll get a sticker. You'll also get a practice outline that you can practice on lower quality paper, and then on higher quality paper, it's going to be a little bit thicker. You'll have the outline for your final project. You will also have some paint and then a sheet of paper with some practice skills. Now, if you didn't buy the kit and you're doing this on your own, you're going to want a light blue, a medium blue, dark blue, maybe like a navy, a purple, and a Payne's gray, and some silver, and that should get you covered in order to do the galaxy. If you wanted to do something fun like add northern lights or something like that, you can do green. So right now, just go ahead and water down a paint, any paint, doesn't matter which color. I usually pick a medium shade when we are practicing our different skills. So the first skill we're going to do is a wet on dry. So we're taking wet paint and putting it on dry paper, and you'll see the paint goes right where you put it. There's no moving it around. Cleaning off my brush, adding some clean water to the paper in the wet on wet section, taking wet paint and dropping it in, and you'll see that the water spreads and blooms and the paint will go where the water is. So you have a little bit less control. It softens up, it blends nicely when you do a couple different colors together. This method is a ton of fun to play with and experiment with. Then I'm going to go ahead and clean off my brush, and we'll do dry on dry. So I get my brush as dry as I can, take it on some paint, it will be a little bit wet, and then I usually lay my brush sideways and brush on the page, and you get some nice, how do I explain it? You get some nice little sections. It's good for when you're making water or on a tree or something like that. When you do a lift, you're going to drop some color into that box. So I'm just filling in the box there with some color, and then you're going to take your brush, clean it off with some clean water, dry it down nice, and then place your dry brush across the page, and you'll see it lifts the paint right up. If you go in a second time, make sure you clean off your brush before you do it again so that you don't have any paint and you're not putting paint back where you just took it off. So that's a fun one to do. The next thing that we're going to practice with is a glaze. So go ahead and dip in some paint and color in that box. Oh, I had to get my brush a little bit wetter. It was too dry from the lift. So we're just going to paint in that box a nice solid color, and we're going to glaze it later with another color, but we will need for it to dry first. So just go ahead and paint in that box, clean off your brush, and we will move on to the next box. So I'm going to get a different color because we're going to do a color drop. So we're going to do some wet on wet, and then we're going to drop in some wet color right on top. I went with a violet color. So with that medium blue shade, I'm going to kind of do the same thing I did with the glaze, but we're not going to worry about it drying. We're just making sure we're getting that section of square full of color. Clean off your brush. You're going to pick up that purple, and I dip it back in the water because you're going to want it to drip into that section. You can also tap your brush if you're not able to drip it in there. And then you'll see how the color blooms out nicely. And this is really fun when you're doing something for a galaxy and you really don't have a lot of control over what happens, and that's part of the fun of everything. So the next section is salt. So if you have some table salt in your kitchen, go ahead and grab some of that. You can pause your video and come back. I think that's what I had to do. I think I had to run and go get some salt. So this will give you some time to grab some salt too. Any type of salt will work. If you do coarse salt, you'll get nice fine little areas. If you do bigger salt, it all changes up. So play around with salt technique, see what you like better or for which situation. So get that little box full of some color, and then you will take your salt, and you can do Salt Bay and drop some salt into that section. I'm using the Morton's sea salt, which is a little bit finer. If I had some really big chunks of salt, I'd be using that for the galaxy because that makes some really nice big blooms. It's also good for when you're doing like snowy paintings. It makes a really cool effect. So the next area, when I'm done moving the salt around, the next area is water. So I'm going to grab some paint with a clean brush and put it in that box there. And then I will clean off the brush and get some clean water and just drop it in, and it'll bloom out and be lighter than the surrounding area. So kind of like the color drop, except it is just with water and you're making that area lighter. You could also use alcohol, which is going to be the next box, and you can see the difference. Water is going to be kind of a faded color like than what you have on the page. Alcohol, it's going to be a very stark contrast. So all different techniques that you can try and play around with, see what you like, what you're comfortable with, in order to then go back in and make your galaxy. So yep, just fill in that section with some paint, cleaning off the brush, and then I'm going to take some rubbing alcohol. It's just, I think it's 91% isopropyl alcohol. And I don't even think I had a dropper. I didn't have a dropper. So I just used the tip of a palette knife and dropped it in. So sometimes you have to get creative. I'm living with my parents currently, so I don't have all my supplies like I would if I was in my studio. So sometimes you have to get creative. And if you do a really dark color, like a black, I should have done a black or a Payne's gray, you can really, really tell the difference. And it leaves a nice circular ring right where you dropped it in. Unlike the water, which kind of balloons out and has more of a diffused look to it. So I didn't have a sponge either, so I had to get creative. You can take a wadded up piece of paper towel and pretend that that is a sponge. Dip it in some paint and then drop it into the square. This is a great method for making trees, or like the leaves on the tree, or making clouds. So you could put paint down, take a clean wadded up paper towel and blot it on your page, and that'll lift and make clouds. So that's a fun technique to play with. You can also use that when you're making the galaxies. Splatter, we're going to do that at the very end with some silver, but you can practice on your page now and kind of get a feel for the control of the brush and where you tap on the brush. If you tap with the opposite finger that you're holding your brush with directly on that silver barrel where that's holding the bristles, you got a little bit more control. The other thing you can do is put marker on the page, and you can see that you can paint over it. Make sure that you've got a water-soluble ink, and you'll be able to paint over it. You also want to make sure that your water-soluble ink is dry, otherwise it will bleed. But for this project, since we have got the skyline of Cincinnati, we'll do that in marker. It makes it a little bit easier to see and makes the project go a little bit quicker. So that's just to show you that you can paint over ink. Some other techniques you can do, you can take your palette knife and drag it along the page. That's a ton of fun to do too. Just use all the different materials you have available to you and experiment, play around, have fun with it. That is part of what makes watercolor so much fun. So we've got our finished practice page. You can take your practice outline, and you don't have to be too precious with this. We're just experimenting with some of the different techniques we just did and how we want to put it on the page, where we want certain colors to go, which techniques we want to use. The fun part about doing this class is that every single person's galaxy pig looks different by the end of it. There are no two same pigs. Even when I do this over and over again, each one looks a little bit different, and that's what makes it a ton of fun. So I went ahead and watered down every single one of those colors, and I'm starting with the lightest color first. I just went in wet paint on dry paper, and I'm going right above the city line, and you don't have to be precious with it. You can put the paint right below where the city would be, because you can go over with that black marker later with no worries. So I start with the lightest color first, because that's where the sun would be as it's setting, and then going a little bit darker and just layering it. So you can have as much fun as you want on this one. You can even go online and print the image. On my website, I've got the PDF file available. You can print it out and do a couple different variations on it. See which one that you want to do, which techniques you want to do, and what colors and whatnot. Now, depending on what type of practice paper you use, it will look a little bit different. The paper that comes with the kit is an Arches paper, and it is 100% cotton. It's cold press, so it holds the water really nicely, and you've got some time to layer and play around with it. Whereas I believe the paper that I'm currently using on this practice page is a Canson, and which is really good practice paper. It just doesn't hold water the same as like a professional paper would. I'm going in a little bit darker. It is kind of hard to see the outline because it is so light, but right now this is just the body of the pig and a little bit into the head of the pig. And with the different colors, I try and separate the head, and you can separate the wings a little bit using the shift in the colors. Kind of helps for it to stand out. Another fun thing that you can do while it's wet is you could take a squirt bottle and squirt the page, tilt the paper around, and let the colors move and adjust. You're adding in some violet into the head and the ear. So I'm going to fast forward this part because I think you guys get the idea. Use the materials that you have available to you. Play around, have some fun with it. And in this practice, I am doing wet on dry for a lot of it. You could also do, and then you kind of have to be careful about staying inside the lines with your color. You could also take your clean wet brush, wet down the majority of the area, and then just drop in colors, and the paint will only go where the water is. So then you don't have to worry so much about staying inside the lines. And then when you get into the finer details, you can go in with a similar color and blend it out that way. So I'm going to fast forward you guys a little bit because this is just the practice. And then we'll dive into doing our flying pig. All right, so I splattered in some silver to make some stars. I'm also splattering in some of that Morton's sea salt. And then I'll decide if that's how I want to proceed or if I wanted to change anything up. Oh, I'm going to drop in some alcohol. And just be totally random with it. Nature is not perfect. It is random. So the more parallel things are and perfectly ordered things are, the more you can kind of tell it was done by human hands. If you make it sporadic, then it makes it look far more natural. And then I'm just going to real quick take a Sharpie and outline the city to see if I like how it looks. You can tell I was painting well below the outline, which is no worries at all because it is a very light color. So in practice here, you could use a Payne's gray or a black to do your city. And I just like doing the pen because it makes it a little bit quicker, but you don't have to. It's your pig. You can make it look however you want. You could not do the city outline if you didn't want to. All right, I went ahead and grabbed my final paper for the final piece. And I decided I'm going to start with the outline first. So I'm going to fast forward through this part. So you can outline this in a water-soluble marker, or you can go back in later with paint or do the marker at the end. It's all in your preference and how you want to attack this project. Or if you wanted to not do the city skyline, you do not have to do the city skyline. So again, I'm going to fast forward through this part and then we'll dive into painting. All right, so doing the marker definitely seems to be what takes the longest out of this entire project, but it is kind of fun and therapeutic, almost kind of meditative to do. So take your time. I had on some YouTube while I was doing that to help pass the time. So now that that is all set, and make sure that the ink is nice and dry, I'm going to go ahead and get my paints wet and then go in and get the page wet using some nice clean water and putting some water into the outline. And I'm not being too precise along the edges because I do want to make sure that the page is pretty evenly wet throughout. And you don't want it to be soaking wet. You want it to be kind of a satiny sheen, not puddled water. And then I'm going in with my lightest color blue and going in and dropping that light blue right along the city skyline. And if you really wanted to make a pretty sunset, you could use oranges and reds, and just be careful when you go in with your blue against orange. You don't want to make things muddy. So I wanted to make this a very beginner class so that no matter which combinations of colors you used, it's always going to look pretty cool and look like a galaxy. So that's why we went in with that light blue first, and then we gradually build up to darker blues and then go into purples and grays. But if you are a little bit more comfortable with color, you can most certainly go in with some different shades. Again, it's your pig. You can make it whatever colors you like. So while I am painting our pig here, I did want to talk about why Cincinnati has flying pigs at all. I moved to the Cincinnati area when I was 5 years old, and I remember going down to the park down by the river and just really being curious by these pig statues with the wings. I was like, pigs do not have wings. What is this all about? Well, Cincinnati used to be known as Porkopolis. In the 1800s, Cincinnati was actually one of the largest pork processing centers in the United States. So there were lots of pigs in the city, and that was one of the main things that Cincinnati was known for. And the name just kind of stuck. So I don't know of any pig processing plants around here or pork packing plants in the area. I should probably look that up, but I'm sure editing Lauren will drop in some information. So, years later, the flying part came in with When Pigs Fly. Not entirely sure why. I guess it was a playful twist on the phrase When Pigs Fly. And let's see. I believe so Google Assist just told me that the flying pig concept came from when General Electric opened in the 1950s and became a plant, and they were producing jet engines, that it kind of developed into Porkopolis and then going from When Pigs Can Fly. So symbolizing that transformation from processing pigs to becoming a center for aviation. And then it was a little bit later on that, oh gosh, where did that go? All right, so then in 1988, so that would have been right around the time that I moved to Cincinnati, it was the big bicentennial for Cincinnati. And there was an artist by the name of Andrew Leicester. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'll put the name typed out at the bottom of this video. And he placed 4 columns resembling riverboat smokestacks at the Bicentennial Commons. And those flying pigs were on top of those riverboat stacks. So that's where I was first introduced to flying pigs in Cincinnati, was going to the bicentennial celebration in downtown Cincinnati. And I remember it being a big deal when I moved to the area. And I moved from a little town in New York, and then going to Cincinnati, it felt like a big city with this bicentennial celebration. And we'd go to Cincinnati Reds games and Kings Island, the big amusement park. So it just really felt like there was a lot to do, and it really felt like Cincinnati was a special place for sure. So then in I guess it was the summer of 2000, there were, and this is according to Google Search Assist, 425 decorated fiberglass pig statues all throughout downtown Cincinnati. and they wanted to celebrate the city's history as Porkopolis, and different artists got to paint different pigs with all different themes and stuff. You can still see some of them around town. I believe it says here it's about 100, or they introduced 100 additional fiberglass pigs. Anyway, I do know for a fact there are still some painted flying pigs around town that you can find. So that's a little bit of history about the flying pigs. Oh, and that park is Sawyer Point Park. I should know this. I've lived in this area for long enough, but it's been a minute since I've been down. So before I move down to Florida officially, I think I'm going to have to take a trip downtown and kind of have a full circle moment and see that. I hope the flying pig statues are still there. They also do the Flying Pig Marathon every year, which I have had the privilege of getting to complete the Flying Pig Marathon once. So I did all 26 miles, and then I've done the half a couple times. My husband and I tried to do it the one year, and it got completely rained out. I think some people did finish it. We decided to stop. We were on the bridge heading over to Kentucky, and there was lots of lightning. And if you know anything about our story, we were both hit with a ground strike a couple years back. So we did not want to be out while it was raining. So no shame in quitting. It does not feel nice to get struck by lightning. But at any rate, that's some history about Cincinnati and it being Porkopolis and why we even have flying pigs, which is pretty cool. Not a lot of towns have a symbol like that. So the pig design is actually a pig from the Bahamas, and I used that pig as inspiration for this flying pig. Pigs are actually really, really intelligent, and they're among some of the smartest domesticated animals, and they're really strong swimmers. So that's why you see them in the Bahamas. That is a ton of fun to do. Something they don't tell you, though, is that the water is full of poop. So the pigs will go to the bathroom there. So it is quite gross, but it is a really neat experience. And you can tell that the people in the Bahamas are very proud of their pigs. And then the wings, I used inspiration from a picture of a grackle that I took at the beach, and it was flying away. I think it was trying to steal some of our food or something. So always be careful with your food when you're at the beach. But so the wings are in mid-flight trying to take off. So I thought that was the perfect combination for our little flying pig. And again, that picture of this city is from a drone photo. So that I was able to outline that. So it is actually what Cincinnati looks like from Kentucky. Now, it is a little bit difficult when you're painting to get those wings. So I usually try and stick to like one or two colors in there towards the top of the wings, just so I can make sure I get those details just right. And you can tell looking at the pig that I use the purple to outline where that ear was and kind of help keep that shape. And I also dropped in some purple color along the body to help add to that galaxy look. So now we're just doing those fine details on those wings. And again, I'll go in with like one color, wet paint on dry paper, and just really taking my time in there. And then once I get some of those outlines done, I can go in and blend it out. Maybe drop in some color too. So while I'm doing some of those fine details on the pig's wings, I am going to fast forward this part. You feel free to pause the video and catch up, and then I'll see you back in a few. All right, I am back, And since I did paint over that black Sharpie with a lighter color, you can kind of tell a little bit. So I'm just making sure the paper is dry and then going in with the Sharpie and really making sure that those lines are nice and crisp so that you can see a little bit more of that pretty city skyline. And it's also giving those wings some time to dry before I start splattering in some silver. You could do it while it's still wet, but it will bloom. I like to make sure that the page is dry so you can either wait and do something like adding the details into your city and making sure that's nice and sharp, or you can take a hairdryer or a heat gun and make sure to very carefully dry that area with the blow dryer or heat gun. You don't want to hold that too close to the paper because it could burn, or if like with a hairdryer and the page is very wet, you could make the paint splatter out depending on how wet your page is. So just be careful when you're doing that. So I'm going to probably fast forward this part a little bit because again, it's just some more of those fine details. I just wanted to pop in and let you know what exactly I'm doing at this step. And now I'm grabbing some silver, and you notice that there is a circle outline around the pig. So he's kind of flying in front of a moon. And you can have a ton of fun with this. It could be a sun if you wanted it to be a sun, or, any color circle that you want. I chose to do silver to make it look like a moon. In some variations I've done, I've made like some shadows and craters inside the moon to really make it look like a moon. You don't have to use silver paint. You could also use the silver Sharpie. That will show up a little bit better than the silver paint does. But again, this is a lot of detail as well. So I'm going to fast forward through this part. But again, you can make your pig however you want. If you didn't want to do the moon behind the pig, by all means, skip that step. So last but not least, you're going to want to get your silver nice and wet and go in and get lots of paint on your brush, and you're going to splatter it all over the pig. I would be careful not to get it on the black city, like the shadow of the city. You can maybe take a piece of paper and cover up the city there, or you can always touch it up later with a Sharpie and then just splatter all over the page. I'll even go outside the pig and into the background because you get stars, behind the moon and stuff too. Have fun with it. You could also use a silver Sharpie and add some dots, or like a white acrylic pen, or use white acrylic to splatter in some stars and draw in some stars. When you're drawing in stars, remember, the more random, the better. Maybe pull up some constellations and try and mimic that, but you don't want very parallel lines or stars because then it starts to look less natural. Congratulations on finishing your piece. Make sure that you sign it. It is never complete until it has your signature. Once it does, there is no going back. It is complete. Congratulations again. And if you learned anything about pigs or about the Cincinnati area or painting, let it inspire you to do something for nature today. And until next time, get outside, see what develops, and stay wild.